Yeah.
There we are.
Which
There we go.
organization? Sorry.
So we have our mics on.
Excellent. Oh, it's time already.
No more
To
speaking.
No more speaking.
campus.
I'll try my best. All the people are sitting on that side. I have to.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. The church bells gave us a sign that it's 2 o'clock and we're supposed to start. We're here to talk about a topic of looking for a common good, but how to actually agree upon what is good. And additionally to an amazing audience who is here to not only maybe listen, but at some point share their thoughts as well, we have a panelist. And I'll do a short introductions and then give each and every one of you a word to maybe broaden that a bit and talk about your organizations. As we are here today, all of you represent one, at least one, some of you even several civil society organizations. I am Guy Glander. I am the moderator for this discussion, and I'll try to sort of lead us through this topic as sort of smoothly and easily as possible, and try to reach a place where we can actually have some sort of solutions, some sort of good practices and maybe ideas for organizations to continue working on. But moving on, thank you for coming. Thank you for being here. First of all, Jordan. I will already apologize for the pronunciations. Jordan, you're from the organization Norwegian Youth League. Then we have Martin, who is here from DD Academy, also known as Domus Dorpatensis for some people. Then we have Mayu from the Green Tiger and the Democracy Fitness. And then we have Jean-Christophe, who is from the Norwegian Helsinki Committee. And we have Helen May from the Youth Atlantic Treaty Association. Thank you for joining me. The topic, looking for a common good. As I sort of promised the civil society organization's viewpoint for this discussion, then my first question for you would also be, how does your organization contribute to the goal of looking for a common good, or the goal of a larger social cohesion, if to use even more complicated words? So, Jordan.
Thank you. Easy start. The Youth Association is an intergenerational organization. We have members in all ages, and our goal is to strengthen local communities and make engaging local communities, and strengthen through cultural activities. And this is easy answer, I guess, is if everybody is singing and dancing, everyone's having a good time. And that's what we mostly do in our organization. We we have cultural activities where people meet and where everyone is included. Everyone who wants to join may come. It's the low threshold activities. That's social cohesion. Yeah, it's a start.
So it's the ability to participate.
Yes, I guess so. Everybody, when the youth associations, it's an old organization. We have played different roles in society throughout the ages. When the first were founded in the 1860s in Norway, Norway was not a fully democracy. And it was usually the first organization in a local community where everyone was welcomed as members, both men and women, and both rich and poor. It didn't matter who you were as long as you were a person. everyone was included. And it was quite radical at its time, and luckily it has become more the norm. So we're not that revolutionary anymore. We're just continuing doing what we have always been doing. It's an old, including everyone.
So bringing together different parties with different background, different experience, bringing them together into the same room and giving them a chance to actually do something
Yeah.
together.
Yeah, you can say that.
Okay.
I mean, all developments happen in meetings together. When you meet, you always learn something new. When people meet with different backgrounds, you will something will develop. I think.
Very good. Thank you. Martin.
The question was about what we do in terms of common good and like achieving it. I think from the perspective of our organization actually is DD Foundation. The DD Academy is one of the programs we do, but it's just I will come to that later. In terms of the common good, I think the perspective of our organization is that that it's not important to have common good. It's important that people can have different ideas about what is good and not kill each other, but be able to still live together in societies, having different understandings of what is good. So in order for that to work, like as humans, we are one of those species who do like to kill each other. It's like natural to us. It's unnatural for us to live in peace with each other, just like in terms of history. So the tool we use in order to achieve this situation in which we don't kill each other is called institutions. So we build institutions, and the purpose of those institutions is to avoid us killing each other. I'm saying killing each other a lot because there's a war going on, and people actually do literally kill each other for disagreeing about what is good. So I don't think, from our organization's perspective, we are aiming towards having a common good, but having different goods and still being able to live together. And we try to build these kinds of institutions, and we try to teach young people with high potential in our DD Academy program to build these kinds of institutions in their societies. At this moment in the region, but in the future, hopefully everywhere else as well, so that we would be able to have disagreements on what is good everywhere.
Thank you. Maiju.
I come from an organization, Green Tiger Foundation. Might be the youngest one represented here. We just celebrated 2 years yesterday with a birthday party. And as the name might indicate, we are an organization that is a cooperation platform, bringing together different sectors of society to start really creating solutions to move forward, to kind of find a new and better balanced, sustainable way of living and a way of new economies that would be, still keep our well-being and maybe redefine it, but also fit into the planetary boundaries. So this is what we're doing. And but my background is I tend to refer to myself as a democracy geek, because I'm an analyst, sociologist. I worked in a think tank as a civil society analyst. So this is my background, and I've always been very interested, like how you actually engage the common people, the communities, the NGOs to create our society together. To kind of contradict the elitist view. So I'm also right now we're doing an NGO actually with together with Kai also. We do democracy fitness programs, and I don't know if you've heard about it, but it's actually from Denmark, and their opinion festival, and the fitness program is really like fun and active way to acknowledge that we actually, every one of us, like we have muscles, shoulder muscles, and stomach and everything. The democracy to be strong needs your muscles to be strong, so you can do something about it. So that's what we do. We have like 30-minute sessions and train your muscles, like active listening and mobilizing and disagreeing. Like we need to study and train how to disagree, etc. So I'm really into also and find it very important as maybe one of the solutions to start seeing more and using more the fact that the people, the changes we need to do to find also the common good or make those different ideas of common goods work, is that we really need to be human-centric and understand that we need to deal with identities, cultures, and really listen to what is needed. So on the yep. So this is what really gets me exciting, and then that's where I find the potentials for solutions.
Thank you, Mayo. Jean-Christophe?
Yeah, sure. I'm Jean-Christophe Delmas. I'm from the Norwegian Helsinki Committee. I should say, disclosure right away, it has nothing to do with Helsinki. It's a fairly confusing name, and the reason it's called like that is now an increasingly historically distant reason is because of the 1976 Helsinki agreements between the Soviet East and the West, and those were agreements about human rights. So the Helsinki Committee in Norway is a human rights organization that's focused mostly on making sure that human rights are respected in practice, and mostly in so-called OSCE countries, so Eastern Bloc countries. Not so much in Estonia, but mostly Central Asia, Ukraine, of course, quite busy, and Russia, and the Caucasus. Now, that's one side of what we do. The other side is, and that's the hat that I'm wearing today, is we are a kind of contact point for everything that has to do with the EEA grants, which some of you may know about. And as part of this, there's all this financing that goes to fantastic projects that have to do with democratization, that have to do with active citizenship, that have to do with the environment, that have to do with making sure that democratic muscles stay flexed and stay worked out. And the work I do is to make sure that civil society organizations, both in Norway and in these countries that receive EEA grants, that they stay in contact, and that as much as possible there is a measure of collaboration between them. There's a certain measure of difference between Norway and the receiving countries, and Norway is, it has its unique challenges, but at the same time, and we've been talking about this since I arrived here in Estonia, there are so many things in Estonia that are very similar to Norway, and it's been really interesting talking about that. So if I were to say what we collaborate, or how we contribute to the common good, it's by making sure that these connections, that this social cohesion across borders and not just within borders stays active.
Helen May.
Hello, it's working? Yeah. Hi, so my name is Helena May Bøgstø, and I'm here representing YATA, which is a short abbreviation for the Atlantic Youth Association, Youth Atlantic Association of Norway, which is like a sort of branch of the Norwegian Atlantic Committee. And the youth organization is spread across a lot of local associations in Norway. And I'm representing the national board. And our main goal is to create a forum where we can discuss security and foreign policies. And we have a big focus on NATO as well. When it comes to contributing to the common good, I think I agree a lot with just Sean said, that YATA focuses on having events and discussions that go across the border, and we often invite YATA groups from outside Norway, because there's around, I think, 24 YATA groups around in Europe, and we have panel debates about foreign policy, the war in Ukraine, and our goal is just to make an open discussion where we have a lot of different inputs. And I think that is good because our members are both students, young professionals, and cadets from the army, and it just gives us a really good and broad base for discussion. And I'm really interested to hear what you other guys think about how we can create a better common good in a time that's pretty polarized.
basically all of the panelists to some extent brought out is where we're moving on now is actually why are we talking about this at the moment? Is it the issue that Ukraine is at war? Is it general polarization trends that are growing? And one thing that I would also like to do in this discussion now is also to sort of, as you understand, we have 3 organizations from Norway and 2 from Estonia, and before we actually move towards solutions and finding cohesion, I'll do a bit of separation. So we see that statistically, even though we have programs that train democratic muscles and make sure that democratic muscles are flexed, we see that the trend of the number of open governments and open democratic governments is decreasing, not increasing. We see that we are in a state of war in Ukraine that is a country that was moving towards open democracy and opening it up even further. We see the trend of increasing polarized debates and polarized views. We see those trends over the different crises that we have had in our societies. And at the same time, we see also one very important detail in that, or one important element when we talk about social cohesion, is trust in general, and trust in institutions, trust in each other, trust in organizations in general, trust in governments is lower in Estonia than it is in Norway. So my question for you, maybe my 2 fellow Estonians, is: what do you think? Why the number? Why trust is lower in Estonia? Why do we see more skepticism and less sort of less cooperation, less trust in institutions in broader? Very sort of.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, easy ones for me. Yeah, that is the question, isn't it? We have a lot of social theories about why that is, or cultural reasons. But I think we are a new democracy, and with the Soviet past, we were really coming from the Soviet society. We actually need more time to get used to what is democratic culture. What does it mean that it's okay that there will not be one smartest guy to tell us everyone what to do, how to be, and how to cope with the fact that we actually have power. What does it mean? I actually have power, freedoms, but responsibility also, every one of us. And I think we still haven't gotten used to it. So now when we are in a crisis and a crisis after crisis, we are stressed out, tired of crisis. That just want to be left be and live our lives, our good lives. Yes, we're very accustomed to our good lives, but we're not accustomed during those times to being responsible, taking responsibility for our freedoms, and being active ourselves. Estonia has been kind of indexed as a flawed democracy, and that's we're quite up high up there, kind of the 20s, between the 20s, 30s in the global view. But our weaknesses are actually political culture and political participation, and those two are linked. And then there also might lie the answer that why we have the low trust. Also, that on the political, I think that in political culture is also not still accustomed to being a democratic political culture. We're so much talking about representative democracy, but actually we are missing out that in the representative democracy you also have this deliberative democracy. You have to deliberate the information you know. You have to deliberate together with peoples, and I think that's where we're lagging. And so the elites, be it economic or political, and kind of the other parts of society, other groups, are drifting apart. So that's I think what we have been dealing with. Or what do you think?
Yeah, I completely agree that it's a historic thing, but I think I would even like double down on that. Like generally speaking, in terms of human history, say the history of civilization, take like 12,000 years, most of that has not been democratic. Most countries don't have democratic histories, and only very few actually have. And those countries became democratic as they were also becoming capitalist. So we kind of assumed that after the collapse of the Soviet Union, when everyone is becoming capitalist, they will also become democratic, and we were wrong. I mean, that's the solution. That's, I think, the answer to the whole democratic, like the solution. We see it in China, for example. They are rich, but not democratic. And I think this is the same in Estonia. We have a little bit of a longer history of democracy, but even 100 years is a very short time in terms of human culture. I think it's several hundreds of years that it takes to actually, get used to something. Some European countries have had 500 years to get used to the idea of a parliament, even much before they had democracy. Having representatives coming together, discussing some things, deciding them with the government and so on. This is something that is in the culture and has been there for hundreds of years. Some might say that it's actually for some of the countries even longer. We don't have that. Our history is very different, and also the Norwegian history, I think, is very different. So I think even the Norwegian democracy is quite young, and I am kind of curious. It's a bad curiousness, but what happens if the sovereign wealth fund actually runs out and the life quality goes down? If the democracy in Norway actually stays good, or if it is actually very tightly connected to the life standard? Because in Estonia, I think it's very, very tightly connected to the life standards. Whenever the standards go down, people start less believing in democracy. Because I think in Estonia, definitely, we have always believed that capitalism, being rich and being democratic, are somehow, connected. But they are not. Actually, many times, believing some theories, you might say that are actually the opposite, because, free markets tend to lead to wealth inequality, and wealth inequality tends to lead to very rich people who have much political power, who are going against democracy. So you might say actually that capitalism and democracy might actually be the opposites of each other. That is not also true, but anyway. So I think in Estonia it's just part of a larger process in which the world is basically discovering that wealth and democracy are not related, and so there are many places in which people do not, aim towards democracy anymore, and they collaborate internationally, and they are influencing us as well. So I think many of the developments we have are not actually related to what's happening here, but they're much more related to the international movements of anti-democracy, mostly and somewhat being initiated from the United States, but also from Russia, also from Saudi Arabia, and many other places. So it's a very, very long story, and there are many, many books written about all of these processes. So I think Estonia is just a victim here in that sense. So just like things are happening in the world, and they're happening to us as well.
Of course, the global trends have an impact on what is going on in Estonia. That is something that we can't sort of bypass, luckily, to be in some respects as well. But I think a lot of the important keywords were already mentioned here. The political culture, the culture of participation, the issue of responsibility, taking responsibility, history, and the connection between wealth and the well-being of people, and democracy as well. But considering that, even though, as Martin, you pointed out, that Estonia is a young democracy, and in that respect, Norway is also fairly young, not as old as maybe some European countries. But we see that there is a difference. We see that some of the aspects, some of the sort of democratic standards that Maiju also referenced, there are I don't want to say that Norway is significantly better, but to some respect it is. So what do you think? What has Norway done that has sort of lead to that success? What does your history show? What have you done better?
Now, I can just rebound on what you mentioned about time, and I think obviously time is a crucial factor. Some countries have had less time. You can think about Spain, it's a very new democracy, and they're doing, I mean, they're good, I hope. But obviously, yeah, Norway is a fairly young country, but an old democracy, in a sense. Your organization exists since 1860. And your organization, and I guess you could say much more about that than I could, but I know by reputation as a kind of school of democracy for younger people. And this kind of grassroots level work that your kind of organization does has done so much to build this culture over an uninterrupted period with the brief interlude of the Second World War. Yeah.
Yeah, I was about to say about trust. Like we have been lucky, we have had a long time. Yeah. Trust is what do you say? Trust takes a lifetime to build and a moment to diminish, and we have had a long, uninterrupted period of, say, to build this trust, to build democracy that lasts. And as you said, when the first youth associations were founded in the 1860s, it took 2 generations before everybody got to vote. It took time. It had to go step by step. First you had the universal suffrage for men, and then a generation later, also women got to vote, and then a little bit later, also poor people got to vote. So it's something. It didn't happen overnight, and that's yeah, as I said, that's a role that our organization always have played. We have a 100-year perspective. We always think 100 years into the future about building society. It takes a long time, and but we have to start with the individual. We have to be to have a good democracy. You have to have democratic citizens. The people themselves have to be democratically inclined to have a working democracy. And our job is, as today, most of our activities in a day-to-day work is we have some dance classes. There's hip hop, it's folk dance, it's theater, it's whatever we do. But we're organized in a democratic way. Or all our members in our organization have the right to vote on our. Everybody has the yearly general meeting where everything is decided. Everyone has the right to be elected. Everybody has the right to vote on what is going to be happening next year. It is how we learn how society is supposed to be, and we learn it in the everyday work we do. It's not about the election every 4 years. That's not what teaches us democracy. It's what we learn in our daily life. And when we learn in our daily life that it's supposed to be an election once every now and then, that elected body is the one who decides what we're going to do. That makes sense also on a higher level, on national, municipality and regional and national and international level. That's if you don't have that way of thinking in the grassroots, you will have more difficult time building democracy, I believe. And it's I had one more point, but I forgot it. So next one.
I'll briefly allow Helena May to comment, and then Martin, back to you.
Thank you. I'm just going to make a brief comment. Another thing I find very fascinating by Norway and the democracy, and we have a strong base on the rule of law. Our country is really long geographically. We're only 5 million inhabitants, and there's mountains, there's fjords. Or in one way, a lot of cities and are separated by mountains and forests, and there's still this social cohesion that's really strong. And I think one of the reasons is maybe a cultural aspect. We have a cultural or a mentality, if you can call it that, which we call dugnad, which is like a lot of Norwegians are born and raised to help their local communities, their local organizations, and the volunteer work is very strongly in the Norwegian heart, if you can say so. And maybe that contributes to, trusting the government and also finding time to how you can improve your organization or your local community. So I think there's also a cultural aspect there, and also after the war it was all this a big emphasis on working together to build the country up again. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it's the sort of common aim.
Yeah,
let's join our forces as individuals to actually take responsibility for building that country. Mm-hmm. Martin, you had.
Yeah, I wanted to comment on the aspect here about the that it begins with democratic citizens or like individuals, and I think that's true. But on another side, it's kind of a chicken and egg question. Does it begin with the citizens being democratic, or does it begin with organizations in which they learn to be democratic? And I think the answer is yes. That is both, basically. That it's not about values. In Estonia, many times when you talk about democratic citizens, we talk about how individuals have certain values, and I don't think that's the answer. I think the answer is democratic experience. And it's like grass level democratic experience in where you are, in organizations, in the company you work for, in the public sector organization you work for, in the NGO you volunteer at. You have actual democratic experiences in your life that make you feel like you have responsibility over the stuff that is happening around you, and you feel like you are responsible for the end result. And then when there are elections in 4 years, then you go and you do the same thing. But in Estonia, I think many times we don't have that in the grassroots level. And then on the national level, we tend to assume that just like values are enough to make us democratic. But I don't think that's so.
So it's the issue of having an opportunity to practice democracy every day, having a chance to do that in different institutions, let it be your local community, your I can't say the word in English, ühistu.
Yeah, korteriühistu. Like in the building you have a community organization, basically.
And different organizations that you either work for or volunteer, and yeah. Jean-Christophe, Mayu, and Torbjörn.
Yeah, no, I just wanna. I feel like obliged to kind of nuance the tableau a bit, because we've now painted this very positive picture of Norway, and of course, I mean, it's not one-sided. Norway has its fair share of issues, and one of those, of course, is the same trends that are being faced elsewhere in Europe and in the world, with increasing polarization in Norway, and this manifests itself mostly as a kind of city versus country antagonism. That will probably be familiar to you and to most people. In Norway, it's quite virulent, and it usually, it can be debates about windmills. It can be debates about conservation of wolves. That's a very, very tender topic, and of course, this is something that is also leading, in a sense, to increasing apathy. We're starting from a good base, but still, there's something that's kind of eroding the foundation, and increasing apathy, and also Norwegians are less inclined to volunteer, sadly, as time goes by. So what we're working to is to maintain the good standard as much as possible. And and I really like that metaphor of like flexing the democratic muscles. I'm gonna take that with me.
Very good. What I wanted to talk about maybe was that I really liked what you said, Helena, about that you Norwegians kind of born and raised to volunteer locally and to help out locally. And I think actually I want to talk about how this opinion festival here, it was Paide was a really it's in center of Estonia. It's the heart of Estonia, as we say, but it was actually a very kind of rural place, not central, and very small place, very quiet, and so when we started with Opinion Festival, we had this really clear idea that we have to raise kind of this democratic next generation with organizing Opinion Festival. So the young girls and boys you see here welcoming you and giving you out those bracelets and everything, at the welcome team is kind of it's a design program. So the local youngsters make the festival to be their own. They're doing it to give them this feeling of building something together. Some of them have been. Some of them started when in their teens, in middle school, in the first year of festival, and now they're going to be a leader of some, part of the festival organization. So that's how you grow. And I think it's a very good example how you have to design something, pre-plan it and design it, that this is what we have to do. And I think there's a lot of potential for Estonia to kind of acknowledge the local community's power to build up more democratic culture. But here we have I think the problem for our country is that there's power kind of unbalance between the state government and the local municipalities. So the local municipalities are kind of kept not too strong and not too powerful. So we need to work on that. But there is a lot of potential because the people care about their home, and that's where you can build, you know, the will to help out, the will to volunteer, and the will to take the responsibility. Yeah.
That is also what we see in statistics as well, that in Estonia at least people are willing to volunteer most when it comes to, you know, benefiting somehow your own local community, helping out with either cleaning it up or building or renovating or something in that respect. Thornberg, you had.
Yeah, it's the same trend in Norway as well. That, people can volunteer if they know exactly what they're going to do and exactly what time they have to do it. And to help a festival, for example, like this, would be quite easy to get people to do. To actually sit on a board for an organization and be part of an organization and running the democratic organization for years is much more difficult. But the point I first wanted to make was I'm a historian. So I just want to make the historic point that the way Norwegian organizations are organized today as democratic organizations, it was not a given. That was how it was supposed to be. In the 1800s, it was when civil society began to organize itself. There was a lot of different ways of doing it. And some were more democratic than others, to say it mildly. And for different reasons, it was a democratic way of organizing civil society that survived, but it could have gone many different ways, and we do not know how democracy would have fared if it had been organized differently.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So in a second, Martin, you can add or follow up. I just want to sort of bring the answers that you, or the input that you just added together, in the sense that it's organization, practicing democracy and having those discussions and debates and decision-making process and having a chance to participate in that. And also, how do you actually, when we talk about looking for a common good, then deciding on windmills and deciding on wolves and the number of wolves, that is also something. And I think, to me, the main question is, how do we actually do it? How is the process built up? Is it the open participatory methods, or is it local municipalities and local communities and the city governments or the municipality governments deciding for the people? And how is the process built up, and how open is it? And is that process itself helping us to sort of foster new generation and new understanding of what is actually a common good? Martin, Maiju, Thornberg.
I just wanted to comment on the volunteering part here a little bit, just because I think this is something that is commonly a problem in discussing civil society and democracy. And the thing that I would like to say is that volunteering is not inherently democratic. That volunteering has also historically existed forever. In very non-democratic societies, and it's a normal thing, and it does not lead to democracy at all, fundamentally. Volunteering can be part of processes that are democratic, and they can lead to democracy, but it's not automatic. And I think that the main difference is like the difference I make in terms of like NGOs and so is that being a member is having an experience of participating in democratic processes. Membership means that you are like a sovereign of an organization. You are part of the people who are deciding on how we do stuff. Like basically the experience of collectively ruling a thing, be it organizing a party or organizing community building or whatever, the collective decision-making processes are democratic. Building a building or doing voluntary work of any kind is not inherently. And I think this is a mistake that is happening everywhere in many places. Like I just had an experience a couple of years ago when I was sitting in Estonian in a room discussing the civil society development plan of Estonia, and we were discussing volunteering in that, and everyone else besides me was a representative of the state. And like historically speaking, the state is not civil society. So we were discussing what is civil society with the state, and only with the state, basically. And I was saying, all of you involving volunteers are not doing democracy here. This is not civil society. And it was a new idea to people, and I think this is part of many confusions in many places, but just I want to say that.
I actually want to reflect on that or comment on that. But volunteering is kind of the first step on the ladder. If you that's the I see a connection here with those flexing those democratic muscles, or start training or acknowledging your muscles and your possibilities, your power. To come out of your shell. That's at least with the youth and all the organizations I've seen that volunteering is the first step. But yes, we have to kind of see it as such. You cannot like equalize it. So I agree. But again, when we look at civil society, being a member of an NGO or an organization, this has become something. I don't know if it's outdated or something in our society that we don't want to do anymore. You can support an organization or a movement and help them out, but you don't want to, give your finger and then take your hand and take your everything. But they do actually. That's something like we want to be connected. Some other ways. So we have to also see that we have to acknowledge this, that the society is changing, and how what is changing, and how do we harness it into this changing democracy? Because again, when we're doing this opinion festival, we're also talking about the youth participation in democracy, and after so many discussions about, again, with those officials and about how the youth are not participating in the NGOs or voting and everything, that like why don't they understand, why don't they do that? And I was like, after so many meetings, I was starting to think that okay, we are missing out something, we are not seeing something, we should turn it around. What are the youth telling us about our democracy? Like, why don't they want it in that way? So what is missing? Like, what kind of democracy do they need? And how can we build that? So I think the climate topic is really, I think, emphasizing the need to actually understand the youth and not just engage them, but to give them the opportunity to show us what will the future be. And how should we move there? We should support them, kind of reflect, and do a kind of a study rounds, learning rounds, and kind of design and build those new models of society, of democracy, of economy also with the youth. Because their voice and the babies and the unborn babies of the future generations are not represented in our democratic system. And this is a flaw that the climate problems, the ecosystem crisis is showing us that with the system we have right now, we cannot face those problems because the important voices are not in this dialogue and not in those decisions. So how do we kind of get ourselves to step back and actually listen to the chickens to let us teach, us be taught. So this is kind of a challenge, but maybe that's also democratic muscle, kind of listen what the others have to tell you.
Yes, how to learn to listen and to pay attention and actually use that information, not only to hear it, but actually implement it, take it into account. Jean-Christophe?
Yeah, just kind of about that, and a point that's kind of echo what Martin is saying about that volunteerism doesn't necessarily equal increased democracy or social cohesion, or it doesn't even necessarily reduce polarization. There's nothing intrinsic about it. If we look at Norway, and I love to come back to windmills, but there is this huge mobilization against windmills, and it's kind of following this new normal mode of mobilization, which is you get these Facebook sites that get set up, People's Action Against Windmills, they get 200,000, 300,000 followers, and that becomes like the kind of new mode of mobilization, and it kind of bypasses all this kind of original ground roots, brick by brick building, which means that you've had a kind of sharpening of the tone of debates, kind of as a result of this kind of viral mode of mobilization, where people have gotten very riled up. You feel you have a lot of people around me that support you, and you're rearing to go. So a lot of politicians have had to just stop talking about windmills because they're afraid, and it's windmills. You know, it's not. You know, it's not nuclear plants, but. So you know, like it's the way you build it up, and you know, hopefully, okay, these things will they will kind of stabilize over time, and they'll form into a kind of more traditional, maybe, or even maybe a new form of organization that will kind of moderate the debate. Hopefully, we've had a political party that was set up just for the creation of a hospital in the north of Norway. I mean, that could be an example of that. But yeah, it's not just about getting out there and getting your opinion about. It's also, you know, about the ways you organize, and that has a lot to do with the way the debate is shaped, and you know, the tone of that debate.
I think what you just described is something that we all in Estonia feel as well. People start to avoid topics that get too emotional, too sharp. If you have a family member who is against vaccinations, COVID vaccine, then you start avoiding that topic with family gatherings and etc. But avoidance does not necessarily solve the issue, and that does not make us find the common good in any way better. Before I go to Maiju, I come to you, dear audience, and one thing that we've been talking here is practicing or sort of having this democratic system in place, having democratic organizations and values as well, for that matter, and having democratic opportunities. But my question for you is, first of all, how do you, if you think of your everyday, how do you experience democracy? How do you feel in your everyday life? What kind of impact does democratic society have on your life? What is it that makes your life democratic? How do you experience that? Yes. And we have Mari running. Thank you, Mari.
Yeah, so me personally, I participate in what you would probably call the democratic process. And to be honest, besides that, it barely really affects my daily life, in the sense that I experience it more as simply a way of governing, and which is contingent on time and place and context. So really, experiencing democracy, it's, in my opinion, it's really the sphere of a very few select people that actually actively participate in organizations and events such as that. I mean, calling periodical elections an impact on people's daily lives is, I would say, you know, it's a fallacy at best.
Mm-hmm. Very good. And Her Excellency.
Thank you. So I am the Norwegian ambassador, and I experience democracy by being here and speaking to you. So sometimes I feel it's very much a one-dimensional discussion, like some of the discussion here today. I'm representing the Norwegian state government. At the same time, I'm an activist in an NGO in Norway. I believe in political parties. And so it's not like being, when my kids were small, I was very active, but I could never volunteer because I didn't have the time. So in this kind of one-dimensional democracy and NGOs, I think you have to enlarge this to have a wider view. And I'm a little bit scared listening to you that none of you have mentioned political parties. So our democracy is not about kind of having a campaign in Facebook. I mean, what kind of resources do you have? My nephew is disabled. He would never been able to set up a Facebook campaign to have his views here. He needs an organization. So it's like seeing and this kind of experience democracy every day. It's not like mindfulness. It's about society and systems. It's about our parliament, and be responsible. Be responsible for your rhetorics, not to have this kind of polarization in the rhetorics about this and that. So I am voting every year, local election, central election. I admire politicians because today you have to be tough to be a politician. In Norway, more people participate in political parties. Much more young people participate. We actually wanted to have youth organizations, political youth organizations here today. But I think in the Estonian civil society view, political youth organizations are not part of this. I'm a trade union, worked in a trade union. All of us are members of trade unions. So it's like, and I understand this is difficult, it's history and so on. But I mean, I want to vote. And if I disagree with the party, I will have a different party. The politicians need to be accountable to people voting, and that's the basic of democracy in them. And that's the difference between Russia, Estonia, and Norway. And I feel that's what we are fighting for in Ukraine. It's not about volunteering. It's about people deciding their own government. And in Norway, civil society is so important to keep the politicians accountable. And Norwegian society was actually, democracy was started in with the Viking assemblies. We have an exhibition about this just over there. So, but it was not democratic. But this kind of view of people electing, I think that's the key. So civil society is really, really important, but also other institutions, and maybe in cooperation. Mm-hmm. Good.
Thank you.
So who's the next one?
Thank you for the comment. I think you brought out very important points here. Do add, yes.
Yeah, hello. I was growing up in Eastern Germany and lived then also afterwards many years in Western Germany, and I learned how different like the mindsets are, especially like if you compare East and Western Germany. So back then there were differences, there are today still differences in the mindsets. I experienced that people in Western Germany are, I would say, a bit more open, more tolerate about many things, I have to say. Comparing to the East, I have a lot of heated discussions with family members when I'm visiting my family in Eastern Germany. And what troubles me is that people are turning again to like populist parties, especially like right-wing parties, which I think is absolutely crazy in Germany. I think we have tried that once. It didn't quite end well for us or the rest of Europe. Why should we do that again? Of course, I get their concerns and so on, but this is where I see the challenge. It seems to be nobody is really taking them serious, listening, and having even touched this topic like climate change, for example. Here I see a big conflict between the generations. In social media, you can read a lot of like comments. yeah, this young generation, these spoiled brats and so on, they don't know how hard it was to get here, and they just living this wonderful life that we built for them. So, and they just want to change everything that made everything easier. So, this is where I see the most challenges, like bringing generations together, or bringing these people together who have completely different attitudes, completely different concerns, and try to find the common sense. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I think this is also what we started with, how to bring people together without wanting to kill each other, how to actually bring different ideas and different mindsets together, and accepting that we are different and that we want different things, and that is okay.
Very quick. My name is George Bogdanov. I'm coming from Bulgaria, National Network for Children. And I'm the person who experienced the democracy every day, going, arguing with the prime minister or ministers in the different agencies as well. But what I would like just to add to the discussion is that, generally speaking, since, let's say, 5 years, we're living in a war in our countries. A war which is trying to destroy the democracy. In my society in Bulgaria, children are used to be used as a weapon, really to disinformate the society, and to disinformate also the whole system. So we start now to not to let's say not to mention and or to avoid children's rights, for example, as a term. Women's rights or human rights, don't speak about this because it's so hot topic for us. Or term of gender, for example. All these kind of issues. So we are in a war of disinformation and propaganda, and we have to, as a civil society, as a politicians, we have to face this and trying really to fight this and to unite the society somehow. The problem what we have in Bulgaria is that I'm suing 5 people within the in my country because of disinformation and propaganda against me personally, but also my organization. And the things what is happening now is that all these kind of issues around the rumors that we taking children from Bulgarian society and sending to Norway to prove the Norwegian genetic genes. So that kind of rumors are still, even nowadays, going around and trying to make it in the way of fun somehow. But especially with the Ukrainian war, we can still facing this kind of polarization of the opinions and the democracy. We should every day working on this and discussing as a civil society and the political party. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. So it's attending elections, it's having political parties, different political parties, and it's having debates, discussions, open narrative every day. All of these things are what democracy is about, and what different views, having ability to discuss and find common good. That's what it's about. Yes.
Hi everyone. 5 years ago, my civic participation started in Romania from a miscontent. I asked an audience to the mayor because the website of the local administration was not transparent enough, and since then it became a passion and started doing community organizing in northeastern Romania. And in 2020, 4 of my core team people, they entered in politics. I could have considered it as related to what Madam Ambassador said. Maybe a loss for the organization, but it was a gain for the local community because they are now in public offices having a previous civic experience, having seen how is to confront with a refusal from the local authorities, or how hard is the effort to make the political parties more accountable to the people. From this perspective, I found that in the last, for example, 5 years, it was very difficult to translate that the public decisions are affecting directly people's lives, and this is somehow also question for the panelists. Maybe how do you manage to do this in order to build that democratic culture in your countries, in Estonia and in Norway? How are you able to translate this message and to bridge the gap and to close the gap between the public policy agenda and everyday's lives, and why should how can you make it appealing for the people to get involved in their communities, to get to know their societies more than voting once and in 4 years, and how can we better bridge this gap? Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So yes, how do we actually get people to understand that decision-making and participating in decision-making processes has an effect on them? So it's not only being able to participate in election and experiencing democracy, but it's also taking responsibility that, my vote matters. What I vote also impacts on access to services and what is funded and what not, priorities, etc. Thank you. A lot of different ideas. I will address my panelists again and then come back to the audience for additions. Maiju.
Oh wow! Yeah, a lot of ideas came to mind. Thank you, Your Excellency. I totally agree that. Yes.
We can say yes.
Thank you. And I totally agree about the political parties. They're very important institutions in a democratic government state, and and here also I think in Estonia we have a cultural and historical problem with that. Again, we started Opinion Festival. Some of our core team members also were really apprehensive about having parties here. Like, we're not going to have them here because they get to talk and amongst themselves and in the media the whole year round. So it takes a lot of kind of learning that no. This is okay. We can handle it. We need everyone here, so here we can meet. This is a good space to create this kind of understanding and get to know each other. That's normal. Let's get over that. And I think again that takes time. But we have also. I think it's a good. Good thing that we see a lot of also civil society activists. People from academia, experts going to politics. We have a new party that maybe will have also a successful come out the next elections. And in Tallinn city government we have new faces, and it's very hopeful. And it's very good because you can show that the party line still has possibilities. You can actually change the courses. Because again, when we look at the OECD trust report, that the problem is that people don't think that their voice counts at all. It's very low trust in that. That if I participate, I don't believe that it will help anything. So how do we change that? So disbelief. And then we have to be, really work on that, I think, both the parties. But also I wanted to add, when we look at the whole system, I wanted to add about the media. I think I am very distressed about the media because, as a sociology student, we were taught that, the media is the fourth power in democracy and everything, all that. Like, where is that fourth power, balancing democracy? I don't see it I haven't seen it for years. So the conflict between we need a responsible democratic media. We don't versus the unresponsible and polarizing media. So what can we do about that? And it's because we talk about how can we make people understand, and how can we help people to do this and that, and we are not even taking into account that the media could help us in that, and that is sad. I mean, that's very big power in today's world. And I think this is something that, information wars and everything, you know what I'm talking about. And but media should be also in a democratic system. It's a very important role, and I think it's gone. So it's a problem.
Thank you, Mayu, for bringing it up. I think where we are moving towards now is, as looking at the time as well, is solutions. So what is it that we actually can do to sort of foster democracy, to make this decision-making process of how we actually look for a common good, how do we decide these, how can we increase that? How can we be better in democracy? How can we, train our democratic muscles? How can we, as individuals, first of all, how can we practice democracy more, and as organizations as well? How can organizations and how should organizations foster democracy? Jean-Christophe?
Sure, yeah. I mean, just one thing about among many possible solutions, but it's the one that I happen to work with. So just increasing exchanges and increasing international cooperation across civil society, across borders, right? I mean, polarization, we hear all the time, it's increasing in our countries, it's increasing in the debates. Debates are getting more virulent. But at the same time, I mean, actually, I was surprised by this. Opinions across the EU and across, I mean, also I include Norway, which is not an EU member, but across EFTA and EU countries, are also getting more, how do I say, there's an increasing number of consensus points across the EU, right? We have had a shift in values, not just in terms of polarization, but also we are more in agreements about questions of rights. We're more in agreements about questions of rights for minorities. We're more in agreement about questions about the climate. And that's across countries. So the debates are more virulent, but you're more likely to find allies elsewhere. And if we can increase as well the amount of cooperation across countries, you're also increasing interest for the practice of civil society and democracy, in the sense that you're making it more attractive, just straightforward, You can tell younger people, oh, join civil society, and it's a school of democracy, and you'll be filling out forms and you'll be chairing debates and so on, but it's not very sexy. But if you can say, well, join up and you'll get to travel to Estonia and talk to an engaging audience and talk about all sorts of stuff, that might get people going and get them started, and then maybe afterwards they'll want to join in on the boring debate meetings and sign up for the charters and whatnot. So that's one small brick in the edifice, at least, or a place to get started or to continue with. Yeah.
Thank you. Helena May?
Just a very short follow-up there. Working across borders, I think it's super important. And Norway is a very strong campaigner for multilateralism. We're in the Security Council now at the moment. And I think, as you said, and back to what the ambassador said of Norway, if you can hold politicians accountable, it might inspire the younger generation to participate in, for instance, internships in the UN or international organizations, because you can align with the values that the government have. I mean, you might disagree, but in the end of the day, they might cause common good. So I think it's an important symbiosis between perhaps the government and the organizations we have in Norway. And I think the government, or at least my opinion, is that the government is good on visiting organizations or participating in debates. Yata just had a big conference on Nordic security policy, which is called NORSEC, which we have every year. It's our flagship event, and we had a lot of, for instance, the chief of the Norwegian army came, we had ministers, state secretaries, and it just makes a really good debate with government, people, and civil society.
Mayu?
So Green Tiger is in Estonia is also organizing climate assemblies, citizen assemblies, and I think that's also one of the ways to. What we have discovered during organizing those assemblies is that well, we know that, but the officials and politicians are also people, and you know that's always the best way to start cooperation. That you kind of try to bring down the you know the roles and just talk to people like what kind of help do you need, you know, what distresses you, what are your fears, and then we discover again that the officials are kind of afraid of the politicians, afraid of people, and people are kind of don't want to, you know, talk to those far out of officials, and there's a separate kind of they're separated. And one of the things that we accomplished with Tartu Climate Assembly, we just had this spring, is that we had a climate assembly of 45 Tartu people coming together and deliberating on some proposals for the city government. And when we had this, we gave the proposals to the city government, and a month afterwards, the government replied to us, like, what have they done with those proposals, and what will happen next, and how will they implement them? So it was really a very positive experience. And what some of the participants told us at those at this last meeting is that it's so good to know that the officials are not some stone faces, that they're actually people, and I can see who is actually working on those issues that are important to me, and it is so important. Like kind of yes, we are both afraid because we have had very bad experiences, communication, dysfunctional communication and everything, and it takes a lot of courage to come out and kind of try to start again. You might get hit, and we might get really like. We are so vulnerable, but both sides on every side. So that's something we need to kind of take in. I think we have to understand that and kind of remember that. That's where we can go on and still keep trying. That's the courage, the democratic muscle. You have to be courageous to keep on trying. So I think that civic assemblies is a good format to give the experience to governments, to politicians, that the engagement cultures of the participation culture still has some new innovative ways. We should keep on it to try and innovate on that, to bring people on board with policy discussions and decision-making processes. We still have to keep trying, and there are methods to do that in a different way, taking into account our history and our previous mishappenings. So yes, to learn new methods and to really, from the NGO sides, to work on it so that the officials and politicians get the experience and understand that there is a way, different way.
Mm-hmm. So increased cooperation and across-border cooperation. New innovative ways to actually get people to come together to deliberate on and debate on different topics, and to see that politicians are people. I think this is one of the reasons I love opinion festivals. You can just walk around here and say hello to, I think, majority of the members of the current and previous and future governments in Estonia, at least. And this is an opportunity for organizations as well, where you can actually advocate or lobby for your cause. At least I personally have had some sort of a discussion, brief or more focused, with 4 different members of our current government. So this is something that gives you a chance to actually see that. They also come and attend these kinds of festivals. But again, question to you, people in the audience: what would motivate you to actually practice democracy? What would motivate you to sort of be part of this, these innovative decision-making processes or discussion platforms? What would motivate you to actually participate in organizations and work together or cooperate with different organizations? So we have first comments. Oh, yes. Yes, previous comment and then new one.
I can kind of jump in on both. I'm an American living here in Paide, and I've actually been able to do some volunteer work for Opinion Festival, and it's been remarkable. I think the U.S. could learn a lot from what's happening here at this festival. From a democracy standpoint, though, I think there's a moral responsibility when you have freedom, and too many people take that for granted and don't apply that moral responsibility. There's a moral responsibility for education, not just indoctrination, learning both sides of an issue and making up your own mind rather than what somebody force feeds into your mind. And I think there needs to be an acknowledgement that if you don't participate, I think human nature more wants to be taken care of than wants to be free. And to be taken care of is a lot different than being free. And with freedom comes this responsibility to engage civically, to be educated. It takes a lot more work to be free than it does to be taken care of. And so, people need to decide, do they want to be free or just taken care of? And if they decide they want freedom, they need that moral responsibility that goes with that freedom. And then there's an acknowledgement too that with good, there's evil. And if people don't fill the gap with good, evil's going to come in and fill that gap for them. And so there's a whole lot of different thoughts on all that. I tried to concentrate it into a brief statement.
And I will follow up before you give the mic. I actually have like a follow-up question. If you say that we need to help people make up their mind whether they want freedom and help them take responsibility or make them take responsibility, my question is how? How do we actually how can we do that? What would be the tools that would help you from your perspective as well?
It's the $1 million question. It's up to people individually. I have so many friends in the States who don't engage in anything, but they have an opinion on everything. Just say the word Donald Trump in the United States, and you have two sides lining up ready to do battle one way or the other. But they haven't educated themselves on the issue, and so you see that there are lots of bad things happening in the U.S. because of people's lack of engagement. And so, one of the things I appreciate about Estonia and some of these new democracies is there's an engagement level in people who recognize something they didn't have in the past, where Americans, we tend to take it for granted. We've had it all along. It's always going to be there. We don't have to engage in order to be there. I think education on history is a huge key. Understanding where you've come from so that you can see where you're going. If you don't understand where you've come from, you just think everything's the way it's always been and it's the way it's always will be, and that's not the truth. It's the best I've got.
So I think it's a valuable point. Thank you. So we had several points from the audience. Just
Oh, okay. My kind of point here, about you were talking about solutions, is the talking from a foreigner's aspect in Estonia. I've been here for 12 years. I would say the biggest thing is not to have to battle for the democracy, because I've been a permanent resident here. I've been here for 12 years. So if you take it on the top level, I can't vote in the general elections. I can't vote in Riigikogu. I have no say. I have no say in the bigger decisions. You take it down to the next level, the local elections. I can vote in these, but there's talk about removing that possibility. And that's another level of democracy taken away. So you take it down to the next level. So, for example, you mentioned Koordehistru, apartment association. So my apartment association has excluded me from these decision making. So when I worked in companies in Estonia, it goes down to the next level. You might not be invited to meetings or asked your opinions on certain things. So it perpetuates from the top level down to the bottom level, and you always feel you have to battle to get the things that you should be receiving as part of a democratic situation. So, for example, like I'm in the court right now with my uhistu just to have the same opportunities as everybody else who owns the apartment. And I don't think I should have to be in that position. And I think the biggest thing for me about Estonia is that Estonia is a maybe this is controversial for some people, but Estonia is a democratic place for Estonians. If you're not an Estonian, it's not a democratic place.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for bringing that up. I think access to these practices that we say that are part of democratic processes is very important. And it's not only people with foreign nationalities. It's also, for example, people with disabilities and different issues can raise up when you're not a very sort of average common person who can actually easily participate in different organizations, volunteer, or set up their candidacy in a political election process. But it's also, yes, having access to these kinds of opportunities. One more comment from the audience, and then we'll coming back to Martin.
Yeah, sure. The theme of these questions is that how do we increase participation? How do we sort of quote unquote cultivate democracy? How do we find the common good through democracy? But I think there's a slight flaw in this way of thinking, and my view is that in order to find the common good, we need to have a common foundation. Now, for example, it's interesting that Japanese political philosophy makes a distinction between the national essence or national character, which comprises, cultural institutions, culture, tradition, language, ethnicity, etc., which forms then this sort of long link between the past, the present, and the future, which is, immutable. Sort of everything else political falls under the aegis of this national essence. And then you have the system of government, which is contingent on time and place, whether it's democracy or whether it's autocracy or whatever. And in Estonia, I would say we're quite lucky that we do actually have this common foundation for everything else, which is, set forth in the preamble of our constitution, which is, the mission of the Estonian state is to ensure the survival of the Estonian people, language, and culture through the ages. And I think having a foundation like that is a great basis for possibly cultivating a democratic way of thinking. I mean, yes, that relates to the previous comment. It might be exclusionary in some cases, yes, but I think having this sort of common, strong foundation under which everything else falls is very valuable. And I was wondering what you might think of this. Like, what kind of a common foundation could we have elsewhere?
Mm-hmm. And how to build it. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Very good insights. Martin.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. A lot of topics to cover here. I cannot do all of them, but very shortly, as this discussion here, we're talking about democracy, and democracy is a very wide topic, so it relates to everything. But specifically, we were asked to talk about the non-profit sector as well and the civil society. And from that perspective, in Estonia, I feel the civil society has kind of dropped the ball, and especially in terms of where and how people can be engaged democratically in their lives. And I think civil society has taken into their heads, non-profits have taken into their head, that their main mission is to do stuff. For example, solve poverty, organize the opinion festival. But I think for civil society organizations, it's also very important to be stuff, to be democratic. Not achieve anything, but be democratic in doing whatever they do. And I think most big, large NGOs in Estonia have changed in that sense throughout the past 15 years, becoming less and less democratic inside, and becoming more and more focused on achieving impact in terms of some specific topic. And this leads to having less and less people who have practical experience of organizing democratic discussions and democratic decision making. And so this kind of our assumption is that being active in a civil society organization kind of makes you a better democratic person, and it's not true anymore. And I think this is a kind of a trickle-down effect that we assume, that when more people are active in civil society organizations, then they are also more democratic in their korteriühistu meeting, and then they are more democratic in the local elections and in local politics. And when the civil society organizations no longer provide that, the problem is that no one else is providing that either. Like, ideally, we should have that all companies are democratic inside to some degree. Ideally, we should have all NGOs being democratic to some degree. But actually, there are very few who actually are. I think this is where we can like practically do many things in order to improve this. We should have programs for NGOs teaching them how to do better üldkoosolek, general assemblies. General Assembly is the kind of the most hated thing in NGOs, and it's one of the main things we learn about democracy. And what we learn is that it sucks. It's boring, I don't want to go there. And that's the result, and that's what we have. It's boring and we don't want to go there into democracy. And there's one tiny thing about the war against democracy, and like in order to have a solution we need to identify all the problems. One of the big problems is that this fight against democracy, this active fighting against not having democracy, is not a new thing. This has been going on at least 2,500 years. In ancient Athens, you had oligarchs working with their enemy state, Spartans, who were not a democracy, in order to destroy the democracy in Athens. Exactly like Trump worked with Russia in order to destroy democracy in the US. So there's nothing has changed. We have been fighting anti-democratic forces for 2,000 years. But we had, and actually probably even longer. And I think the mistake we've made for the past like 50 years is that we have this illusion that we don't have to do this anymore, that we can just have democratic discussions with them. But we can't. There are people who are actively trying to destroy what we have. And those people now have nuclear warheads and big countries and a lot of money. So we should actually be actively fighting those forces. And in Estonia we have like 2 NGOs doing that, but we should have like 20 because Estonia is small.
Okay. I think yes, I really truly agree with you what you said. I think we have a problem that we see that cooperation works, so we tend to be soft. We have partners in civil society, in the public sector, and amongst parties and politicians. And I think when we think about the good or strong NGOs in Estonia, they are really believers of cooperation, and that is also important. We need to cooperate. But when we do that, we haven't still learned like how to balance it. There are times when the times around us change, when you cannot be afraid of conflict either. Like you have to ask really uncomfortable questions and really face your, cooperation partners. And I think we don't know yet how to do that. I think we haven't lost it, but we have seen that cooperation is doable and it is good, and it's it's something that we have also financed with our programs for MGOs. So no one's financing to be really loud, really active, really good watchdog anymore. Yeah. So that's becomes even more difficult when we think about our topic here today is also polarization. It's something. It's a big no. We don't want to be polarized. We need to kind of build bridges, But again, like how do you balance it out? Okay, we're tired of polarization. We're tired of fighting against each other and taking sides. But then again, on the field where we need to fight, we have lost it because we don't want to go there anymore. We're tired of it. So I think it's a very good it's important thing to talk about. How do you balance it and still be okay that on one topic you are partners and you can collaborate, but also there are some basics that you won't if you don't agree upon that, you still can fight also. Kind of how do you mix it up?
Like 5 follow-up questions from you, because it's now getting interesting, at least for me as an executive director of a network of Estonian non-profit organizations. For me, this is like, what is it that we need to actually do in order to stop avoiding polarized issues and heated discussions, but actually how to maintain them, how to foster them, how to call and organize them, how to bring different parties, different views together and talk about these things. We only have a couple of minutes left of our time. I am terribly sorry for that, but just to sort of sum up this debate today, thank you all for your insightful comments and questions and your devoted attention. My dear panel, your final thoughts, your final comments, each and every one of you. Thank you for your input so far, but Torbjörn, how would you sum up this from your organization's perspective? What is it that you think that we in Estonia, for example, could do in order to actually learn how to be more democratic?
How many minutes was it?
30 seconds.
30 seconds is, I think it's important to don't give up. Keep working on having democratic organizations. Don't forget the people who don't really care. They have to be included in democratic. What was the name of the General Assembly in Estonian? Yeah, in Norwegian it's årsmøte. We hate it as well. It's the same thing, but we have to have it. It is the foundation of our democracy and how where most people learn what democracy is, and we have to somehow get everyone on board with it, even in the soccer teams and whatever people do.
It's continuing to have those decision-making bodies.
It's a long-term job to keep democracy. You can't. It's not something you can fix in a day.
Definitely not. As we see, history is a key role player in this debate as well. Helena-Marie, I come to you here.
Hello. Yeah, that was a very good sum up, Torbjörn. I think one short point to add, you asked what Estonia can learn from Norway, but I also think it's interesting what Norwegians can learn from Estonia, because maybe a common conception is internationally that Norway sort of thinks of itself as being best in the class, but we have so much more to learn from other nations and how you organize your work, and even though we have a lot of common grounds, I'm sure there's differences as well that we can address more and make us even better. And as we discussed here previously, it's so important to not take things for granted and keep working on those good democratic processes, even in hard times like this. We've had a pandemic, it's a war, there's electricity crisis, food prices are going up, and that all affects the civil society sector. And I think one last point is that one reason that maybe civil society is dropping at some points is because, it's expensive to live now and people have to work hard. And when do you have time to, like you said from the US, it's like being taken care of versus having the freedom. When things are hard, people may be more leaning towards being taken care of. And yeah.
How to keep people taking that responsibility even when times are getting rougher.
Yeah.
Jean-Christophe.
Yeah, I mean, just to echo, what Torbjörn said, just don't stop doing stuff. Just keep on carrying on, and I think the idea that it's a kind of Sparta versus Athens, struggle. It's an important one, but it's also just like at a very micro level, and there's just one small pebble that's a part of the mortar, that's a part of the edifice, and yeah, like keep in mind the big stuff, but don't get bored of the small stuff, basically.
And don't give up on the small stuff.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Mayu, Martin, any final comments?
Yes, a lot of thoughts, a lot of ideas again, but one thing I think, keep in mind other people, that they actually are allowed to have their own ideas, their own beliefs, whatever they are, if they're different from yours, and maybe we should kind of take time and think, what does respect mean? Because we need to start respecting each other again. What does it actually mean? That I respect you as you are, and I think all of us really need that from each other. So maybe when you walk around here in the Opinion Festival today or next week, maybe we can find a moment or a discussion or pick out some place where you know that you may be disagreeing or you maybe don't understand. Take that time to be in that brief discomfort zone and to really listen and try to understand, okay, why are they thinking like that? Why are they doing those things they're doing? And find this, the common ground, like to understand. And I think that's a very, very good, this is democracy muscle training for you briefly. You can design for yourself today in these discussions here or next week or whenever. Just, keep in mind what is respect, and everyone has right for their own understandings of life.
And while having that respect and acceptance of differences, not wanting to kill each other and not wanting to harm each other is vital. Thank you. Martin?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna take the most practical thing out of this and make it into a slogan. So let's make Üldkoosolek cool again, and I think we should make a project about that, and figure out ways to make Üldkoosoleks cool again. How people would actually want to come to them, and this would probably solve some of the issues, at least on the ground level, and so trickle down from there. Yeah.
Okay, let's make Üldkoosolek cool again. Thank you all. Thank you, dear panelists. The church bell rang a couple of minutes ago already. I'm sorry for going over time. Thank you for your thoughts. Thank you for listening. My name was Kai Glandorf, and I hope you had a very interesting discussion with me. Let's meet again. Väga palav.